Isel, can you just go through the whole situation with the Kinahans, how deep they're in? Because, of course, one of their fighters had a great win last night, an Irish fighter, and, of course, an MMA fighter as well, won last night for MTK Global, which is their management company. And people just seem to be relaxed about it. And also that some boxers, the likes of Michael Conlan, of course, Tyson Fury, they're not being asked about their relations to this drug lord, and instead they're kind of just keeping it quiet. So can you just run through it for us and take our viewers through the whole situation, please?
Okay, I'll give a very brief, broad overview. The Kinahan family is now basically, it's been sanctioned in the last week by the US. And this has been the culmination of years of work between Interpol, the Irish Gardaí, who only have a certain remit, and the US authorities. And as a result, they've identified Daniel Kinahan, who is the person we'll be speaking mostly about because he's the man involved in boxing, Christy Kinahan, his father, and Christy Jr., his brother. There are other people who've also been subject to sanctions and also specific companies, which is where it gets interesting from boxing's point of view. So it's not just money associated with Kinahan, it's money associated with Kinahan associated businesses will be looked at and sanctions taken against anyone who's involved. For those of us who have an interest in boxing, Kinahan's first foray into boxing was the establishment of MTK Global. He subsequently left MTK Global, supposedly, and cut all his ties. After cutting his ties with MTK Global, he became what was described as a close advisor to various boxers. And some of the boxers involved, we've already mentioned, I suppose, Mick Conlan, who is no longer with MTK or under Daniel Kinahan's advisorship, whether or not he ever was. He's now managed by his brother. Tyson Fury, who has come out and congratulated Daniel Kinahan on making the biggest fight in boxing, which he described as him versus AJ, which actually never happened. So that's where we stand with him. Billy Joe Saunders, Rocky Fielding. The list goes on and on. Basically, any boxer who was involved, Sonny Edwards is another high-profile name. Any boxer who was involved in MTK seemed to subsequently credit Daniel Kinahan with the role they took and the mentorship they gave to boxers in whether they were making fights happen or ensuring they got paid. And as a result, boxers and MMA stars, again, the likes of Darren Till springs to mind, would come out and basically a lot of verbal berating of people online who were saying Daniel Kinahan is a cartel leader or Daniel Kinahan has brought misery on multiple people's lives as a result of his drug trade and murderous feuds. And as this all culminated, we've now seen in the boxing world very few of these people who have previously praised Daniel Kinahan coming out to actually say anything negative. The only big names I suppose we've seen are some journalists have come out and basically written articles highlighting the sanctions that have now been imposed on Daniel Kinahan. Bob Arum, who is the 90-year-old promoter with Top Rank and probably one of the best known faces in boxing globally, has come out and admitted that he paid $4 million to Tyson Fury's advisor Daniel Kinahan for his last 4 fights. And he's actually gone so far as to have a complete revisionist history moment where he forgot praising Daniel Kinahan and saying he was a good guy, and saying now that Daniel Kinahan had told him he had previously done bad things and that he had insisted, he being Bob Arum, that Daniel Kinahan was not involved and would not be involved in the making of the Tyson Fury fight with Dillian Whyte, which takes place next week. And this is, I suppose, where I'm going to bring the final part of our wrap up on broad strokes of this too. The fight that's due to take place next week, obviously Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte, is Tyson's return fight to the UK, where his belt is on the line against Dillian Whyte, another British fighter. There was a press conference, a online one as opposed to the physical in-person one, last week within 2 days of the sanctions being raised. And basically 70 journalists were invited onto this call and were given the opportunity to ask questions. And it was a highly choreographed and staged managed event in which not a single question was raised on Kinahan, the sanctions, his associations with Top Rank, with Bob Arum, with Frank Warren. And I think it's been a disappointing week for boxing journalists and boxers who have failed to come out and speak openly about the issues. But it's been a great week for law enforcement agencies, and thanks to Daniel Kinahan's desire to be a boxing promoter, he has made a family that presumably could have relatively gone unheard of on a global scene now the biggest name in global crime, I think.
Yeah, again, I mean, criminality in boxing, even when we're talking like
They're not
Tyson Fury.
new.
No. I mean, it's always been there. I mean, we know it. I remember speaking with old timers in England when I was over there training as a 19, 20-year-old, and them telling me, oh well, the one big thing about the pro ranks is sometimes you have to lose a fight to win a title. And they had all these things like, and all like, and very, very serious issues were surrounding it. And of course, Tyson Fury himself, this is a man who was busted doping and then claimed it was because of eating uncastrated boar testicles. Then, of course, going on, drunken, coke fueled rampages, saying that he has depression. He comes from a really rough background. I'm not making excuses for him, but then, it just seems to channel into it. I mean, like his father, of course, was jailed for gouging at somebody's eye with his hand, like his finger. So, I mean, this is not a shiny night. Isel, I just got to ask you before we move to the lads and ask them, why did no journalist ask a question? There was a lot of them there. There's a lot of good journalists who I would read or I would listen to. Why did not one of them ask a question?
I think the questions were either submitted for prior approval or very clearly managed. And I think the ones who I expect better of, because they've criticised other aspects of boxing, I think they are afraid of losing their access with Top Rank or with Tyson Fury or with his camp. And I think it's really disappointing because there are certain journalists who, if they'd got them on, certainly would have been willing to ask the questions. You can't have a press conference the week of the sanctions and not ask about Kinahan and consider yourself a journalist.
No, that is